What's up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Danielle Hallen, and I am back with another true crime video. And today we are speaking about the unsolved and very mysterious murder of 36-year-old Kirby Carpenter in Tippah County, Mississippi, back on November 30th, 2022. So this is a relatively recent case. Kirby Carpenter was shot in front of his own home on November 30th, 2022, and his body wasn't found until days later on December 2nd by his girlfriend. Now, this case has gone viral across social media, namely TikTok. That's where I've seen it the most. And you guys have made sure to flood my suggestions with Kirby's name. His family only a month ago started a Facebook page called Justice for Kirby to try and get his story out there as far as possible, because honestly, there is just not a lot of exposure. There are a handful of articles with the most bare minimum bits of information. I did manage to find one really great interview that's recently been done, and I have that linked down below. But other than that, his family is solely relying on social media to hopefully help them in some way. Now, that being said, a majority of this information is coming from what Kirby's family has publicly shared, so let's dive into it. Those that knew Kirby, even if it was just someone that met him one time, knew what an incredible guy he was. He had a great head on his shoulders. He was the kind of person that was always willing to help someone else out, whether that meant he was paying for someone's meal at a restaurant, or if someone needed gas, he would happily fill up their tank, or just really any other small act of kindness. Kirby was also incredibly successful. This guy was a self-made millionaire. He had opened up and operated 2 liquor stores in both Ripley and Boonville, Mississippi. I do believe he eventually went on to sell those, but he had so many other things he was dabbling into. So he also owned and leased several real estate properties in the area, and it seems like the largest business venture at the moment was his gold and silver business. And what's funny is that, according to his family, Kirby had always been fascinated with coins, even as a little child. So his sister, Casey, has stated that this is probably why all of his business ventures were so successful. It's because he took all of the things that he loved, all of the things that he was incredibly passionate about, and pursued them as a career. So he genuinely loved what he was doing, which honestly, I don't think a lot of people can say that. And something else that he loved just beyond measure was his family. His family is incredibly tight-knit, and they make that so obvious in their search for justice for Kirby. They always maintained contact with each other. He seemed to spend a lot of time with his siblings and his parents. His parents lived only like 5 to 10 minutes down the road, and on top of that, Kirby had gone off and started a family of his own as well. Kirby had 2 children, a 4-year-old little boy from a previous relationship that he had, and they shared custody. And just 4 months prior to his death, he had welcomed a little girl into the world with his girlfriend of about 2 or 3 years. And Kirby, his girlfriend, and this 4-month-old baby all lived on his beautiful piece of property that he owned that was over 100 acres in Boonville, Mississippi. This was an amazing place for Kirby to raise a family. He had it set up for them to hunt, to explore. There was plenty of room for the kids to grow up and play, room to have adventures on their side-by-side, have fun with all sorts of projects. There was a pond where they could go fishing. I mean, he was always doing something. He had plenty of space for his motorcycles that he loved and his vintage cars that he liked to work on. Kirby worked so hard to provide for his family and give everyone around him the best life possible, which is why a phone call on Friday, December 2nd, 2022 immediately gave Kirby's mother a sinking feeling. This call was from Kirby's girlfriend, and she wanted to know if anyone had been in contact with Kirby, which is an alarming statement in itself because she lived with him, and if she didn't know where he was, where on earth did he go? She claimed to Kirby's mother that he had not come home the night before. So this is Thursday night. And this was not at all like him. Kirby's mother hadn't personally heard from him in a couple of days and immediately felt like something had to be off. So she started to question his girlfriend a little bit about his plans on Thursday to try to figure out what maybe could have happened if he got caught up in potentially a silver deal, maybe some emergency happened. She was just trying to wrap her head around all of the different possibilities, but his girlfriend claimed that she had absolutely no clue what his plans had been. So they didn't even know where to start. And while it wasn't really abnormal for Kirby to go off, like he would go off at late hours at night, or he wouldn't always tell his girlfriend where he was going because he had about a million things that he was trying to accomplish throughout his days. He had different deals for his gold and silver business that would just pop up randomly. And so he would sometimes just kind of go off, but he always made it back home at night. So this was a first. And to make matters worse, after further questioning, Kirby's girlfriend stated that she actually hadn't seen Kirby at all since Wednesday morning when she headed out for work. He had been fast asleep in bed and they didn't speak that morning. So he didn't just fail to come home Thursday night, but he wasn't seen all day Thursday. He wasn't seen Wednesday night or all day Wednesday. Kirby had been gone for 2 whole days at this point. And even more strange, which just totally threw his mom off, was the fact that his truck, which was his daily driver, and all of his other vehicles were still sitting in the driveway exactly where they belonged. So where on earth could Kirby have gone to that would take him away from his home, away from his newborn baby, away from his girlfriend for 2 days that doesn't involve him taking any of his vehicles? So at this point in the conversation, Kirby's girlfriend asked for the number for one of Kirby's good friends because at this point they're thinking, if he didn't take any of his cars, they're all still here. He obviously didn't go on a gold and silver deal that maybe went wrong. So maybe he was picked up by somebody. And so they were thinking, we can call. It would still be strange for him to go off for a few days with a friend and not say anything, but it's definitely worth asking. His girlfriend ended up calling this friend and eventually called his mother back to say this friend claimed to have not seen or heard from Kirby either, but they did give a suggestion that Kirby might be behind his house in his deer stand. This is just after Thanksgiving, so hunting season, according to the lovely Google, would have been in full swing in Mississippi at the time. And so this seemed like a plausible answer as to where Kirby had been. Again, it still would have been odd for him to be out there for days, but it was definitely worth checking out. So Kirby's mom offered to send someone to help his girlfriend go and check the deer stand, because keep in mind, she's got a 4-month-old baby. Not just that, this 4-month-old little girl had the flu, and it wasn't just a quick walk to the deer stand behind the house. Usually Kirby would take his side-by-side to get up there because of the distance, but Kirby's girlfriend declined. She's like, nope, I got this. I can manage it myself. I'll reach out to you when I get up there. She said that she was going to feed their dog, nurse the baby, put the baby in a carrier, and then head out to check. And about 30 minutes or so later, Kirby's mom gets another call from his girlfriend. And she says, you know what? I made it to the deer stand. He's not here. And so she had plans to head back down to the house and they'd figure out what to do from there. But suddenly, in the middle of this phone call, Kirby's girlfriend stops talking and then says Kirby's name 3 times, Kirby, 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 and the phone call abruptly ends. Right away, Kirby's mother ran from her job straight to her car and called her husband, who is Kirby's stepdad, and said, look, something weird is going on over at Kirby's house. He hasn't been seen in 2 days at this point. I was just on a call with his girlfriend that abruptly ended. You're only 5 to 10 minutes away. Please go over there because you can get there faster than anybody else. And around the same time that Kirby's mom was making this call to her husband, Tippah County Sheriff's Department was called out to the home on County Road 600 by Kirby's girlfriend. She had called to report Kirby down with a gunshot wound. When Kirby's stepdad arrived at the home, he pulled into the driveway and saw that Kirby's truck was parked in its usual spot. So the driveway came up to a 2-car garage. He typically parked on the right side. The door of that garage just stayed open. From my understanding, it was malfunctioning and they used this to go in and out. The garage itself was only used for storage. I think he had one of his motorcycles in there. And so nothing really seemed amiss. Everything looked as it usually did. And when he pulled up, he didn't hear anything. I don't know if he was expecting to maybe hear some commotion. We got out of his car and walked past Kirby's truck and started to head into that open garage door to get into the house and figure out what was going on. And the second he stepped foot into the garage, all of a sudden, to his right, he hears Kirby's girlfriend screaming. So as I stated, there's the 2-car garage, Kirby's truck on the right side, and to the right of that is a carport. Kirby's girlfriend was on the other side of that carport, kneeling on the ground, holding their 4-month-old baby, seemingly still on the phone with 911. She was maybe 25 feet away, and beside her, he saw Kirby's boots kind of poking out. Now, when he got closer, he saw that this was clearly Kirby on the ground. Kirby's feet were facing towards the house, but strangely, Kirby's body otherwise was covered up. Now, I have not seen it stated what exactly this covering was. I have no idea if it was a sheet, if it was a tarp. Regardless, on top of that cover and on top of Kirby was also a truck toolbox, like a very large truck toolbox. And so the stepdad's first thought is, oh my gosh, here's the answer. This truck toolbox fell on him. He can't get it off. He's stuck. And so he panics and runs over to try and shove the toolbox off of Kirby. And then all of a sudden it hits him. But why is Kirby's body covered up? So he stopped for a second and decided to pull back the covering and realized Kirby had been shot and he was no longer alive. Within minutes, first responders arrived and Kirby's stepdad immediately went down to meet them, gave them a brief synopsis of the very minimum details that he had at this point, and then they walked over to where Kirby's covered body was and where Kirby's girlfriend was still kneeled beside him. And she allegedly immediately states that Kirby had ended his own life. Statement took Kirby's stepdad entirely by surprise because this didn't at all sound like Kirby. And according to what Kirby's stepdad has told everyone else about this moment, it also kind of took the officer back because it was very clear this was not a self-inflicted kind of situation. Just the logistics of everything immediately suggested there's no way he could have done this to himself. And once they started looking, they didn't see any sort of weapon anywhere. And so the officer allegedly said, you know what, ma'am, no, that's not right. This is very obviously a homicide. Both Tippah County Sheriff's Department and Mississippi Bureau of Investigations, also known as MBI, began to arrive at the home after this. They were just trickling in, along with Kirby's mom and other family members and friends, and everyone was shocked and absolutely devastated. None of this made any sense. Who on earth would want to go after Kirby, this guy that made it a part of his life mission to do what he could for others? He didn't have an enemy. He didn't have a bad bone in his body. This wasn't adding up. None of this made any sense. Who that made it a to do what have an enemy? He didn't have a bad bone in his body. The scene was have an enemy. He didn't have a bad bone in his body. The scene was have an enemy. He didn't have a bad bone in his body. The scene was he didn't have a bad bone in his body. The scene was Kirby's girlfriend confirmed that she had not seen him since Wednesday morning, so the timeline of everything was really up in the air because something could have happened to Kirby anytime between Wednesday early in the morning to Friday at whatever point they were called out, which I've not really been able to nail down. She also stated that she had been in and out of the house this entire time and I guess just completely missed Kirby's body on the other side of the carport. Kirby's girlfriend told both his family and police the same thing as well in regards to finding his body. She claimed that she had strapped their baby in a carrier and headed out of the back door of the home, beelining it for the deer stand using the hill directly behind their home, which I have a video of that I'll be showing later on. And when she got to the deer stand and didn't find him, she turned around and decided to make her way back from the deer stand using the cleared out path that Kirby had made for the side-by-side. And that path spits you out on the far side of the house right by the carport. And so it wasn't until this moment where she's walking down this hill that she looks over and sees Kirby's body in the middle of updating Kirby's mom on the phone. And so obviously at that point, she called out to him, hung up the phone, and went to help him and call 911. But this didn't really, again, help to narrow when the crime occurred. So they started to check out Kirby's body and clothing for any potential evidence. And they ended up finding a Kroger receipt in his pocket dated to the evening of Wednesday, November 30th, the last day that his girlfriend claimed to have seen him. And so this obviously showed he had been out and about that day. and had been fine up until at least Wednesday evening. But again, what happened after that? That did shave off a few hours on the timeline, but still wasn't really narrowing too much down. Kirby's keys to his truck also ended up being found in his back pocket, so he'd obviously gotten out of the car, tucked his keys in, and when they checked the truck, it was locked up tight, so it's as if he was trying to go inside. I don't know if he typically used the back door, which kind of seems to be the direction he maybe was walking, or if maybe someone like jumped up from behind his house. Regardless, when they looked inside of Kirby's truck, his cell phone was still very obviously sitting inside of the car, plugged into the charger. And those same groceries he had bought days earlier were still sitting untouched on the seat. So at this point, they were able to conclude it was very likely whatever happened to Kirby happened to him right after he arrived home that Wednesday night. So that entire 2 days and 2 nights where no one knew where he was and he never came home, he'd been lying in the yard of his home dead from a gunshot wound. By this point, Kirby's family and friends had decided to gather at his parents' house to grieve and be together and figure out what was going on and support each other. And they also took this as an opportunity to ask Kirby's girlfriend questions to try and piece things together, because all of this so far just seemed so unbelievable. His girlfriend just confirmed the same story that they already knew, but also added another detail stating that while she hadn't seen him since Wednesday morning, she had spoken to him. She claimed that she spoke to Kirby around 6:30 p.m. Wednesday evening. Even pulled out her phone. I guess she scrolled to double check when the text message was. So this did also help for the timeline, but she didn't mention exactly what they spoke about and if he seemed okay at this point. And they also decided to ask a question that had been burning in their minds because it could potentially help the timeline even further. When Kirby and his girlfriend had their daughter back in the summer of 2022, just months prior to his death, the girlfriend had invited her parents to come and stay with them from out of state. From what I'm saying, I believe this was her first baby. She obviously probably wanted the help of her parents. They had planned to originally stay there for about a week to help out where they could and let Kirby and his girlfriend get into a new routine with this new baby. But somehow that week ended up turning into 4 months. They just didn't leave. Kirby had hosted Thanksgiving a week prior to his death at this house, and the girlfriend's parents were still living there at that time. And Kirby's family also knew that they had still been living in the home the Monday before he disappeared, because Kirby's girlfriend had texted everybody and been like, hey, whoever was at Thanksgiving, like, my parents now have the flu. Is everyone else feeling okay? Now that Kirby has been shot in front of his own home and everyone had a moment to kind of sit down and think about what was happening, they were like, where are his girlfriend's parents? And what everyone knew, they had still been living at the house. They'd been there for months. And if they were there still, maybe they could have some sort of helpful information. So where on earth were they? And they asked the girlfriend, and according to her, her parents had left Tuesday night. So just 24 hours before it was believed Kirby was shot and killed. So this left the girlfriend as the only other adult living in the house at the time of Kirby's death. Authorities finally cleared the scene. Kirby's sister and his girlfriend came back to the house per the request of Ellie to gather a few things, because at this point, they don't know if the house is safe to stay in. They don't know what kind of crime has occurred here, if this was a random crime of opportunity, or if maybe Kirby had been targeted or the house had been targeted. Maybe the girlfriend was targeted. They had no idea. And so they wanted Kirby's girlfriend to come and get whatever she needed to be able to go and stay somewhere safe. And when they arrived, MBI ended up directly going to Kirby's girlfriend and saying, hey, we need to speak with you alone. Now, I'm not entirely sure what was asked or spoken about during this, but whatever was said made his girlfriend feel incredibly nervous, because after being questioned, Kirby's girlfriend and his sister went into the home to gather some things, and the moment they walked into the nursery, Kirby's sister said that the girlfriend just sunk onto the floor, looked up at her, and said something along the lines of, "I didn't hurt your brother." Kirby's sister was so confused and shocked because this had not even been a thought in anyone's mind. They had not spoken about this, they had not felt this way, or they likely wouldn't have invited her to stay at their home. But according to the girlfriend, whatever the MBI said to her made her feel that they believed she was involved. So clearly she was worried that maybe Kirby's family would feel the same. But Kirby's sister tried to reassure her and say, look, they're just following protocol. It is nothing at all abnormal for spouses, those to last see someone who was, murdered or just went missing, to be questioned. She's the mother of his child. There's just so many things that come into play when it comes to questioning people who might have information. But his girlfriend remained a nervous wreck. She was super worried and asked if she needed to get a lawyer. Now, Kirby's girlfriend did stay with Kirby's parents that night, so she did not have to stay in the house. But by the following day, she had decided to go back to Kirby's home, and her parents had actually returned to Boonville to support their daughter during the loss. And it kind of seems that from this point on, Kirby's family's relationship and communication with his girlfriend slowly declined. But the investigation itself was pushing forward. Kirby didn't exactly live in a very populated area, and the house itself had neighbors that were kind of few and far between. So the idea that it was a crime of opportunity just seemed a little less likely. It was more likely this was a targeted sort of attack. And Kirby also just wasn't the kind of man that had a lot of enemies anyways. While he did dabble with a lot of money, tons of money changing hands, lots of different goods, a lot of business deals, he didn't really have any bad experiences that anyone could think of off the top of their head that would lead to this sort of outcome. I think he did have issues with one person ever, but that person had passed away at this point. So obviously, they were not involved. So to kind of push this idea that this wasn't like a random robbery or anything like that, or that this was someone that was trying to potentially come in and steal his silver or his gold, that Kirby was found, his mom had gone into the house and checked his safe room to see if things had been cleared out or if there were any signs that someone had tried to get into the safes. But when they were all opened, everything seemed to appear completely in order. Authorities decided to first go to the Kroger to pull any CCTV or anything that could potentially be helpful. And thankfully, and I feel like this never happens in any cases that we look into, Kroger still had the footage. And they were able to find that Kirby was wearing the same clothing while shopping at Kroger that he was wearing when his body was found. So this just added to the idea that Kirby had been killed just as he arrived home Wednesday night. They then decided to go to a nearby fire station that Kirby would have had to drive past and pulled CCTV from that as well. And they were able to confirm that Kirby's car had passed by that night. They were able to get a timeline on it, and he seemed to be going in the direction leading him to home. And between that, the conversation that he had with his girlfriend, the Kroger receipt, they ultimately decided that Kirby had likely arrived home sometime around 7 p.m. Wednesday, November 30th, and he was shot shortly after. Now, to just keep checking things off their list, I'd spoken to Kirby's girlfriend to figure out where she was that night, see if she had any sort of alibi, and they were able to find that she had a confirmed alibi for the time frame that they believe Kirby was shot. Now, if that time frame went one way or another, I don't know if that would change things, but from what their understanding was at the time, this girlfriend was not at the house. So they were now working from square one at figuring out who would have been at Kirby's home to be able to do this to him. Now, Kirby's body at this point had been sent off to Pearl, Mississippi to have an autopsy. They were incredibly backed up at the time, and so it was going to be a little bit before they received any sort of results from that. I have yet to see to this day what exactly was found. I have seen his sister state in one interview that there were no signs of an altercation on his body, so it's not like he got into some big physical fight with someone or struggled with someone, which to me makes it sound like whatever happened to Kirby was a total surprise, or this was someone he potentially knew and did not want to have to fight. But as authorities were doing everything that they could to investigate the crime, tension and strange incidents with Kirby's girlfriend and her parents began to worry Kirby's family. A good handful of really weird things happened. So Sunday, December 4th, a few days after Kirby was found, his mom and sister had decided, you know what, we need to start to put our focus into something that we can do at the moment. And that was ensuring that Kirby's children were taken care of, as well as arranging Kirby's memorial service. Kirby had always told his family that he had a last will and testament, in his safe room and that it laid out everything for them. So if anything were to happen to him, no one would have to worry about what he wanted, where he had money, accounts, just all of the estate things that can be so incredibly overwhelming. So they decided to head to Kirby's house to check his safe room, get this will and testament to start moving forward. Now, this room was just wall to wall safes. As you can imagine, having that much cash from real estate properties and deeds and gold and silver, I mean, there's just no telling how much stuff he had, guns. He needed a large area to keep all of his things out of the hands of children and out of the hands of, people that may want to get it. The girlfriend and her parents were still staying there at the time. There was no intention to tell them to leave. That's just not how Kirby's family is. They wanted to make sure that she had somewhere to stay still, somewhere that was comfortable, that Kirby's daughter had, all of her belongings and was safe as well. But when they arrived, they noticed this very large sign that was written down on a cardboard box that they said kind of looked like a gun box. And it was attached to the side of Kirby's truck. And it basically said something along the lines of, "We're grieving, we don't want any visitors," which is not something that is necessarily abnormal. And obviously Kirby's family did not kind of group them in with visitors because they were Kirby's family and this is Kirby's house. So Kirby's mom and sister went into his home and the girlfriend was nowhere to be seen, but her mom, her dad, and the little 4-month-old baby were still in the home. And according to the girlfriend's parents, she, I guess, had just been super overwhelmed with everything going on and wanted to go out for a girls' date to get her mind off of everything. So Kirby's family and the girlfriend's family had brief conversations. They were playing with the baby, and eventually Kirby's mom went to head to the safe room to grab the paperwork that she needed. And the girlfriend's dad followed after her. And allegedly, once they got to the room, he confronted her and said, "I don't need anyone coming down here and causing problems." And this blindsided the heck out of Kirby's family because they're like, wait, problems? Like, what are we doing? This is his house. We're coming here to start working on his memorial and make sure the kids are okay. Things just kind of went from 0 to 100 really quickly. And so Kirby's sister, who was in another room, heard this and was like, wait a minute, what's going on? And made her way to the safe room to try and figure out why this was being said. They hadn't been aggressive or pushy or anything at all. They'd been nothing but kind and welcoming to everyone and tried to make this as seamless of a situation for everyone as possible given the circumstances. And when the girlfriend's dad was pushed more about why on earth he was saying things like that, he said that there had been a rumor around town that Kirby's family was saying the girlfriend was involved in his death. Again, they were blindsided because this is nothing that had ever been stated by their family. Just like before, they had never even considered that. This has not been something that had crossed their mind because if they truly believed that, they wouldn't just be waltzing into this home or bringing the girlfriend in to stay. And so when they explained this, ultimately he decided to stand down and relax, but it was unsettling enough that Kirby's sister texted her stepdad and texted her husband to be like, something weird is going on here. Not only had they had this altercation with the girlfriend's dad, but they'd also kind of picked up on a few strange things around the house itself. So all of the locks and doorknobs and things had been changed all across Kirby's house, which I will say that could have just been done simply for the safety of the girlfriend and her family. Again, nobody knew if they were being targeted. That would probably be one of the first things that I would do. But when you see that, along with some other things, it is a little bit questionable. But there were also tire marks that were going right through the mud, straight to the back door of the house. And Kirby's mom had been there the night that he was found, had taken everything in, and those locks and the doorknobs and stuff hadn't been changed then, so they knew they had recently been changed the last couple of days. The tire marks were not there, or trust me, she would have noticed them and been like, who came back here? Is this someone involved in who shot my son? So this was all kind of new stuff that they couldn't really explain. And when Kirby's mom went back to the safe room to finally get the papers they came for, all of the codes to the safes had been changed. The same safes that his mom had been able to successfully check just nights prior with absolutely no problem. So obviously, they immediately confronted the girlfriend's parents, being like, look, we've already noticed some strange things here. Who changed the codes on the safes? Like, this is weird. This is his belongings. We've got to make sure everything stays in its place because this is all his estate. All of this is going to go to the children. We've got to keep things together. But no one seemed to have any answers. Just like a bunch of dumbfounded looks followed this question. And shortly after this, Kirby's stepdad and brother-in-law arrived at the home because of the alarming text message sent by Kirby's sister. And they asked the exact same questions, but they still acted like they had no idea what anyone was talking about. And while everyone was kind of arguing and trying to figure out how the codes were changed, Kirby's mom decided to kind of head outside for a minute, take a breather. She just so happened to notice that the girlfriend's dad's car had been pulled up right beside Kirby's truck. So that left-hand side of the garage. And she wanted to go and check it out. She felt something was off. She had a gut feeling. So she looked inside and it was absolutely loaded down with silver. The girlfriend's family was confronted about this because, what are the chances they just so happen to have a crap load of silver sitting in their car at the same time that Kirby's safe codes have all been changed to the safes that he held all of his extra silver in? And so they're like, what is going on here? And gave the same kind of dumbfounded looks and I don't know what you're talking about sort of answers. And so this kind of started another bickering argument between the families, like, this isn't making sense, you need to be honest with us. And allegedly, the girlfriend's dad looked at someone in Kirby's family and said, look, you're here causing problems basically, and you should be thankful because he said he was showing them grace by allowing them in his home. Spoiler alert, the house did not belong to Kirby's girlfriend. It did not belong to the girlfriend's parents. It was solely in his name. So that was just a bizarre encounter. Now, Kirby's family immediately at this point took whatever they could get their hands on and left with all intentions of getting an attorney the following day. And they were starting to get this awful feeling that something weird was going on here. And I just want to clarify, not necessarily that any of them had played a part in Kirby's death. Maybe they were just taking advantage of a situation, but regardless, they were stressed out about it. Later that Sunday evening, Kirby's girlfriend ended up sending his mom a text message saying, look, we need to sit down face to face and deal with what is happening. And I'm assuming this just meant she wanted to talk about the issues that they had had at Kirby's home earlier that day when she was out having a girls' day. And so Kirby's mom was like, absolutely, and headed over there because at this point she's like, we're going through enough. Like, this is such an awful and intense and emotional and stressful and devastating time. And having this sort of strange tension happening was not something anyone wanted to have to deal with, because from Kirby's family standpoint, they hadn't accused anyone of doing anything. They hadn't done anything that would make Kirby's girlfriend or family feel that they believed she was involved. Things are just taking a strange turn and they didn't want it to go that way. But also to protect herself, given the very shocking and out of nowhere situation from earlier, she decided to first call the local police and let them know what had happened that day and that she was headed back over to the house and she wanted them to be there just in case. She did not feel incredibly safe going over to Kirby's home. But when she arrived, Kirby's girlfriend ended up totally refusing to open the door. She wouldn't come to the door. She wouldn't even come outside to speak to his mom. She was refusing to do anything. And I think she did send a text and was like, I didn't mean to come over right now. But regardless, she, for some reason, just like totally barricaded herself inside of the house. So Kirby's mom took this as an opportunity to speak to the officers about the incident earlier that day. And she's like, look, it's weird. I bet if you looked in the trunk right now of the dad's car, you'd find silver. But unfortunately, they can't just willy-nilly go around opening people's trunks. They need warrants and things like that. And so Kirby's mom was like, fine then, I will do it myself, and walked over there, popped the trunk again. Sure enough, it was loaded down with silver again. And I just want to make it super clear as well that this isn't just like a hearsay type of situation. This is something that police are aware of, and this is something that is documented. The fact that the girlfriend's family had Kirby silver in their car. And it was documented even further a few days later. So Kirby's family that following day, that Monday, immediately got a lawyer because unfortunately, through the loss of their loved one, they had to focus on the fact that they didn't want his belongings just leaving his house. I know that Kirby did also have a life insurance policy, and I'm not entirely sure who is listed as the beneficiary, but I know that it wasn't his girlfriend. So essentially nothing was supposed to legally go to her, and they had decided the best option obviously was to split everything down the middle and give it to each of the children. Now, unfortunately, while Kirby had said so many times, I have a will that lists everything out, up only having a will drafted, and it had never been signed, it had never been buttoned up, and so it wasn't necessarily as easy as they were expecting it to be. So his mom was ultimately made administrator of the estate to help and finalize everything. And Kirby's family were not the only ones to obtain a lawyer, but his girlfriend did as well. And not just any lawyer, she actually obtained one of the most well-known criminal lawyers in the area. And so they all ended up going to Kirby's home the Tuesday after his death to create a list of these belongings, to make sure everything was accounted for. And that silver that had been in the trunk of the girlfriend's dad's car was handed over to the attorney to be added to the estate. So again, this is a documented thing that happened. There were a few things around the home that were not accounted for, and they were some like pretty alarming things. One of them being Kirby's small pistol. Now, while I'm assuming he had many guns since he was a hunter, he had one small pistol that he always kept on him. He carried it in his front pocket. But when Kirby was found and they checked him out, he did not have his gun in his pocket. It was nowhere around him. And they ultimately weren't able to find it in his car, in his house. I mean, this gun was absolutely nowhere to be found. And according to his family, anyone that knew Kirby down to literally the gas station attendant would have known that Kirby carried this gun. And so the attorneys in the FBI came in and started asking the girlfriend, hey, where is this gun that everyone is telling us about? And she kind of got like frustrated and was like, Kirby didn't carry a gun. He didn't have that small pistol in his front pocket. He hasn't done that since me. So insinuating that Kirby had just totally stopped carrying a gun. And that sent alarm bells ringing for so many reasons. Think about the nature of his job. He is constantly going and meeting people to purchase and sell gold and silver. I can assure you people that do that likely make sure they carry a gun on them. And there also were recent pictures of Kirby with the gun in his pocket. His sister had taken a photograph of him at her house at I think April, so a couple of months before, and you can clearly see he has the gun in his pocket. And his sister also said that she had poked fun of him about it just a month prior for carrying it at the pumpkin patch. He had not stopped carrying this gun, so why on earth was she trying to say that he had? A, she is not very observant and had just not noticed that he was carrying it, or she didn't want someone to go looking for it for some reason. Now, another massive thing that was missing from the home, which is wildly frustrating, was the sync box from Kirby's camera system. He was crazy about putting up cameras at his house, and those cameras easily could have captured whatever happened to him that night. But conveniently, the sync box that ensured that the cameras were all communicating and in working order, and I believe, if I'm remembering it correctly based off of my system, I don't know what system he had, but it like also is a lot of the times where all the data is stored, all of the recorded things, totally gone. And I am unsure if this means someone went to the home after the fact and removed it to get rid of evidence, or if it's a possibility that this had been gone. Maybe it broke, maybe something happened before the fact, but unfortunately at this point when they really needed it, it was no longer there. Now, despite these strange things, thankfully Kirby's family was able to figure things out from here, split things down the middle, make sure his children were taken care of, and it had also been agreed upon that the 4-month-old baby and his girlfriend would be getting child support checks monthly to make sure she was able to take care of Kirby's son. And finally, on December 17th, Kirby's family was able to hold his memorial. His little 4-year-old boy repeatedly went over to his casket to see his daddy one last time. Cannot imagine the level of pain and anger that everyone was feeling, losing a young, successful, great man who had nothing but positive things to contribute to society. Having to say goodbye to him and not knowing still who would do something like that. According to Kirby's family, Kirby's girlfriend and her dad did attend the memorial, but for some unknown reason, her mother, who was in town, chose to stay behind. And according to them, this is not the first time that she had done that. Maybe it was just something that made her uncomfortable. Maybe she wasn't as close, but for one reason or another, she repeatedly did not show up to these different events for Kirby. This was going to be the first Christmas without Kirby, and so far police had not really been able to narrow anything down. And to add to the pain, just days after Kirby's funeral, right before Christmas, like literally within a day or so, his girlfriend and her parents abruptly left the state. Now, while Kirby's girlfriend did alert his mom, she said that she was only going away to spend a week with family in Pennsylvania just for over the holidays. But when Kirby's mom went to check his home hours after she had left, it was painfully clear that she had left with the baby and had no intentions of coming back. All of Kirby's girlfriend's personal clothing and belongings had been taken from all of her drawers. The whole house wasn't gutted, like there wasn't a ton of stuff stolen or anything, but she had packed up all of her things and got the heck out of there with the outfit that she wore to his funeral left behind. And the only other things that remained in her drawers where she kept all of her clothes were 2 handwritten wills. One for her, the girlfriend, and one for her dad. And both of these handwritten wills had been put together just days after Kirby's murder. And this does not sit well with a lot of people that have looked into this case. Some people theorize that this was done for nefarious reasons, like they were worried something they did would come back to them, or they were worried for some reason they would be arrested, or they had some sort of something happening that made them feel they had to write wills up all of a sudden. We'll say that also tragic deaths like that can push a lot of people to look into their own end-of-life planning. But why would they leave those behind? If that's something they were worried about and so driven to do, and, because of what had happened, I just don't understand why they would leave just those 2 things in the dresser. Like, it's like they wanted them to be found. If you're clearing out all your drawers and like packing all your stuff up, and then like you don't just look in the drawer and see it's not empty and there's wills in there and just keep on pushing unless you want someone to find it. Over the course of the next few months, as the investigation slowly trucked along, Kirby's family did manage to just barely keep in contact with his girlfriend, solely to speak about Kirby's daughter, check in on her, try to be in her life, get updates. I mean, she's going through her first year of life, all these things that Kirby is missing, that now his family is missing, and we're talking about such a tight-knit family. I can't even imagine what that must have felt like, not being able to see when she started to crawl, or when she ate her first solid food, or when she, started to walk, and all of these different things. But unfortunately, after a couple of months, all of that communication completely stopped. Kirby's family at this point had no answer as to who ended their loved ones' lives, and had also lost his daughter as well, with absolutely no idea where she was living or how to reach her. I can only imagine that his whole family felt like they were living and are still living in this gigantic limbo. Now, the only things that have really been stated at this point in regards to Kirby's case is that they likely have persons of interest, but there is no suspect to my understanding. And a person of interest could just be someone they want to speak to, which in my opinion is very likely the parents of the girlfriend. We're also able to kind of slightly figure out information about the weapon used to kill Kirby, but unfortunately, it did not give them as many answers as they had hoped, because whatever gun was used is untraceable. They do know that it was either a shotgun or something that shoots with a shotgun shell. And unfortunately, that type of ammunition just does not leave the same identifying marks like a handgun would. And so even having that only narrows it down to a handful of different kinds of guns. His family started to take numerous videos of his property and, tried to walk things through, figure out and theorize as to what may have happened. And they ended up finding another thing that was totally missing that was suspicious. Kirby allegedly had numerous trail cameras all over his property. As a hunter and just again, as someone who has a lot of valuables at his home and on his property, it was kind of important to have them. And multiple people, including his neighbor, were able to confirm that. And so his family was like, okay, maybe we can go and find these trail cameras on these 100 acres and they could hold some sort of information. But when they went to look for them, there were none. They couldn't find a single trail camera. They only found one strap indicating there had been one at a certain location at some point that was now gone. And so that's just another thing, a potential piece of evidence that has mysteriously vanished from Kirby's property. I spoke closely with law enforcement to try and theorize and find ways to move forward. I know that his family wanted to drain the lake on his property because we've got, at this point, his missing gun and then the gun that was used to shoot him. They are not the same, just FYI. But unfortunately, the resources just aren't there at the moment, and I don't think there's enough solid information and evidence to suggest that's where any of those things went. So it's just so far not happening unless they can figure something out. They know every single car that went up and down the road by Kirby's home the night that they believe he was killed, and I am hoping that at this point they've obviously traced those cars back to owners, hopefully spoken to them, and more recent events have actually pushed Kirby's family to have a social media presence, something that honestly I want to talk about real quick. No family ever wants to have to do. It is not lost on me or other true crime creators that this is not fun. This is a last resort for families desperately trying to find answers for their loved ones. A place for families to go, whether they want to or not, but feel they have to in order to push their loved ones' cases forward. It is not fun putting yourself out there. It is not fun being vulnerable. It is not fun airing dirty laundry. It is not fun having to recant and rehear some of the worst moments of your life over and over and over again. And it's put out on display as a spectacle for some people who are watching it for the wrong reasons, but they felt that this was something that they needed to do. And they are hand in hand with so many other families that have felt the exact same way. And whether they want to or not, they have to put on a brave face and step out into the world of social media because of the good that can come from it. And so they have started a Facebook page, as I stated, and I really, really encourage you guys to go and support them. Be a positive voice to drown out any negative voices that might be out there. It seems that at this point, they are heavily questioning Kirby's girlfriend's story. And so far, it's not that authorities are not working on the case. I don't want to say that, but there's just not a lot of movement. And so I think they want that attention there. I think they want that pressure there. And also something great that can come from, this type of thing is resources. There are so many people out there willing to help that work with search and rescue teams, nonprofit organizations, their PIs doing things pro bono. And this is a great way to kind of put themselves out there, connect to people like that. Now, as I had stated, more questionable things have occurred since Kirby's death, and the behavior afterwards just increasingly gets more suspicious. Now, Kirby's sister, again, as I've already stated so many times in this video, has said that they had never even consider the fact that his girlfriend was involved. They pushed through so many things at the beginning of this investigation, but looking back on everything now, his family has so many questions, and there are so many things that are starting to stick out that are making this strange. How on earth did Kirby's girlfriend come in and out of their home for 2 days and not notice his body laying there? And why did it take 2 days just to begin with to question where he was? If you dissect it and really think about it, this was the girlfriend's first child, from my understanding. And since that baby was born, she had the constant support of Kirby, the constant support of both of her parents to help her, and her parents, who had been at this home for 4 months at this point, got the flu and for some reason decided, and this could be coincidental, that it was the perfect time while having the flu. They suddenly decided to pack up and drive states away back home. The timing of it is just super weird and a really inconvenient timing. And you would think if they didn't have to go back, they wouldn't choose right before Christmas, a day after getting the flu, to do it. So she was home by herself. Her parents weren't there to help her, and Kirby wasn't showing back up at home. And so I just don't understand how she wasn't in a total panic when that happened. Just from the fact that, her boyfriend didn't come home that night. But if you think of all of the circumstances piled together, maybe I'm just an incredibly needy person, but if that were me, I would be freaking out. Not only was she suddenly very alone in the house with an infant with no help and was completely unable to reach her boyfriend, reach Kirby, but the baby also had the flu. So kind of like the first time dealing with a sick child as well. And so it just seems like a lot to be going on. And maybe that was all happening, and that alone is what distracted her from the fact that Kirby was outside laying in front of the house. Maybe she was so wrapped up in trying to figure out how to be a first-time mom with a new baby that she kind of lost touch with what was happening with Kirby. But I feel like at the bare minimum, you would think she would call someone for help, call her parents back, call Kirby's family or something, call them sooner than that to be like, hey, I can't find him. What on earth is going on? And this leads to other obvious questions of, okay, if at the bare minimum she didn't actively reach out to anyone to try to figure out if someone could help her and where Kirby was, did she never look around the house? Like, did she never look into his truck where she would have obviously seen that not only is he missing, but his phone is sitting there plugged in, plain as day in the car? Like, clearly he didn't just go off with a friend somewhere. She parked beside him in the driveway, and so did she not, out of curiosity, just so happen to peer in? Like, did she not do a quick round around the outside of the house or go out of the back door, or maybe walk to the other side of the carport to call out? And on top of that, according to Kirby's sister, the girlfriend had spoken to multiple members of Kirby's family in those days that he was missing and had failed to say anything. So that Thursday morning, after he had not been seen all day Wednesday or Wednesday night, she had taken her daughter to a doctor's appointment. And she had messaged Kirby's mom and sister about the flu diagnosis that her daughter had. And then she got like this little height and weight sticker. And I guess during this conversation, she randomly mentioned, hey, has anyone spoken to Kirby? But she never made it seem like it was like an emergency, or that she hadn't seen him all day, he hadn't come home the night before. She just said this one thing and then completely dropped it. And then she even stopped by his mom's house that night, spoke to his mom and sister face to face, and never mentioned anything about him still not reaching out to her and still not being home. And so at this point, they really started to analyze the girlfriend's story. And they kind of dissected what she claimed happened and took videos to show their personal thoughts about it and compiled all of them on their Facebook page to explain why they believe there is something strange going on here. So I'm going to show you all of the videos that they have taken, not only so you can see what their personal experiences are with this area and their personal knowledge is, but also so you can kind of get a better idea of the layout of everything and why they find it so strange she somehow didn't see Kirby, and how it seems like the story that is being told is almost being told to specifically ensure it seemed like she had no weight.
This is Casey. I'm Kirby's sister, and I am going to video the path that the person living in the home with Kirby at the time he was killed says that she took on Friday morning when she was going to look for him. Currently, I'm standing in Kirby's living room. The person told us that that morning, as she was going to go out to look for him to see if he was in his deer stand, that she walked straight out this back door, straight up the hill, all the way up the hill, and then to the deer stand. So I'm just going to show you the terrain that she would have had to cross to do that. She claimed that she had her 13-pound baby attached to her, wearing her at the time. It is a little muddy today, so excuse me while I walk through. Okay, she said she walked straight out the door, which is there. Sorry, that's my friend. Straight up the hill. The reason that that is relevant is because Kirby's body was laying next to those toolboxes where they are, about in this area. So if she had looked right, she would have seen his body. But she says that she did not, that she walked directly up this hill that I'm about to attempt to do. And I actually don't know if I can. Oof. Okay, as you can see, my attempt up the hill failed. I'm standing on the back porch looking at the hill directly in front of me. You can see where I slid down the hill. I am not able to go up that hill. I have attempted several times since his death and have not been able on my own. And I am of much smaller stature and not carrying a baby. Also, just so you're aware or can see, this is what you're looking at when you walk out the back porch. So, this hill, very steep. Also, behind the air conditioner unit there, Kirby's side-by-side was parked. So, typically, if Kirby went into the woods to the deer stand to hunt, he would have gone on his side-by-side. He would not have walked that distance, nor would she have, in my opinion. But you can see that there is, on down here, kind of a less steep trail that Kirby had made to go up and then over to the deer stand, which is way down there. But of course, had she walked this direction to go up that hill in attempts to look for him in the deer stand, which is what she said she was doing, then she would have been walking directly to where his body laid, which was right here. Okay, I am currently standing where Kirby's body was found, looking back toward the home. Just wanted to show you a full circle of this hill. This is where Kirby laid. And to get you an idea of something else that's very relevant, I'm going to attempt to walk up the hill in a less steep area, and we may not be able to do it. But it actually may be better if you all just come and do it for yourselves. But when you go up this hill where she says that she walked, Mom and my friend Andrea and I attempted that a couple weeks ago, and we did go up where it's less steep. We weeded our way through the woods. I got a couple ticks on me. There is actually about halfway up that hill a ditch that is between waist and chest high. That's very large, that I don't think she even is aware of that is there. There's no way she could have crossed that ditch on her own, but much less with a baby. And I will at some point get up that hill and show you all the ditch if that's necessary. But like I said, this is the side-by-side trail that Kirby always used if he was going up to his deer stand or down to his lake onto his property. This is a very, very steep hill, and again, there's no way that she walked up it. Okay, in attempts to show you a little more, this is where Kirby's body was laying. This is the back door that she says she went out up the hill. We're going to walk up a less steep portion of the hill to try to show you a little bit of the terrain and to get to the ditch that we know that she's probably not aware of being there and that we know she was unable to cross. But here is the kind of terrain that we're looking at, and this is the less harsh portion of the terrain. You can see that we're now up behind the house. I'm losing my socks. This is the kind of stuff that we're looking at. I'm not even sure how we got to that the other day. Okay. There's lots of briars. Ooh, what's that, Andrea? Again, you can see very rugged terrain that she would have had to cross while wearing a baby. Oh, watch that one too. Not a clear path at all from the way that she was stating that she came. As you can see, I'm now directly behind the house. The door, the pathway that she says she took up here would be right there up that rugged hill. And we are still continuing on. Overlook my heavy breathing. I'm not used to this. I think this is actually directly behind the back door. So you're looking at the extremely steep part of what she would have had to walk up. And this is now the ditch that she came straight up to get to the deer stand, which is still on up that hill through those trees, that rugged terrain. She would have had to cross this ditch, and it's hard to tell from a camera viewpoint. But Andrea, if you'll hold my phone, I'll stand in that ditch so we can just show exactly how deep this ditch here is. I don't know how I'll get out, but we'll figure it out. Ooh, lots of briars. Ah. Yeah, there's no way that anybody could have done this.
No.
I actually don't know if I'm willing to do this. You got me still.
I got you.
Whew. Ow. Sorry. I'm whiny. I'm not made for this. Okay. So I'm not even at the bottom of the ditch yet. I have briars in my leg right now. Okay. So the path that she would have taken, or claims to have taken, would have led her. She would have had to come across this ditch, which you see is over waist high. And to get up on the other side, actually, this side of the ditch is to here on me. It's above my waist. Keep in mind, she was carrying a 13-pound baby, supposedly. Not sure how she got over this, unless she really. Oh. I'm now on the other side of the ditch, and there's still lots of rugged terrain, and another hill up there that she would have had to go up. And we will actually, at some point, get the side by side and ride to actually where the deer stand is, because it's a very, very long walk.
So take that for what you will. But when I looked into this a little bit deeper, I found something that, in my opinion, is probably one of the more alarming things posted to the Facebook page. And it was just posted by a commenter who managed to find a photo of Kirby's girlfriend holding a gun. And this is nothing strange. We're talking about Mississippi here. Nothing odd for people to have guns. I'm not personally familiar with a gun, but it's the kind of gun that she's holding that is what sent my alarm bells absolutely screaming. Now, I showed my husband this gun and said, hey, what kind of gun is this? And he said that's a Taurus Judge revolver, which, by the way, is like an incredibly big gun. And I asked him what it shoots, and he said it shoots a 410 shell. And for those of you that don't know, a 410 shell is a small caliber shotgun shell. And I don't know if that's her personal gun. I don't know if it's a friend's gun. She is with someone else in the photo. I don't know if she had access to that gun all the time. But I mean, if that's not kind of like a blaring red flag for authorities to go and ask more questions, I don't know what is. This just adds something else suspicious to the ever-growing list. And while the girlfriend does in fact have an alibi that is confirmed by authorities, something else Kirby's family finds strange, and they didn't find this out until they got Kirby's phone returned to them, but the last conversation that Kirby and his girlfriend had at like 6:30 p.m. that Wednesday night was her suddenly asking him about his location. Maybe she just wanted to know where he was, like when he'd be home, details like that. I don't know. I haven't personally seen the text messages, but you can kind of piece two and two together with that one. And to add to it, the groceries that were found in Kirby's car appeared to kind of be potentially things for dinner. There were 4 steaks, and people have like gone absolutely crazy over this on social media because they're like, 4 steaks. I thought the parents had left. That's just enough steaks for the 2 couples. And we don't know for sure. It could have been just to put into the freezer to have on hand, but some people believe it's because the girlfriend's parents hadn't actually left, or there was someone else that was supposed to come to the house that night to have dinner and something happened. So again, take all of that as you will. Now, according to Kirby's sister, the girlfriend's parents have never been questioned, as I've already stated, and I have no idea if authorities have even looked into their whereabouts. Honestly, just from the perspective of these people lived with him for 4 months, literally were there 24 hours prior to his death, they could have helpful information. It's not even from like a standpoint of thinking they are involved or this, that, and the other. Just as average protocol and what you would expect from an investigation, you would think they would be spoken to. They could know something. So I'm not sure if they haven't been questioned because authorities haven't gone to question them, or if they refuse to be questioned. But regardless, I hope that eventually that ends up happening. Now, I do know that the girlfriend went and got her attorney and refused a polygraph, which no good lawyer is going to suggest you take a polygraph, but she also outright refused questioning from that point on as well, which I don't understand why that would happen. This is literally the father of your child. You have the best criminal defense attorney out there, so why do you not feel comfortable sitting down and helping police figure out what happened to him? Ultimately, no one has been labeled a suspect by authorities. They're still working on the case, and unfortunately, Kirby's family still has absolutely no idea where his daughter is. All they know is they send child support checks monthly to this out-of-state address that they assume is where they're living, until just a few months ago when they tried to wish Kirby's little daughter a happy first birthday. Not a text to the girlfriend, tried to make some sort of contact. I read the text, I posted it here. It is nothing malicious or angry or anything, but there was no response. And so over the next week after the daughter's birthday, they continued to try to reach out, make sure the little girl was okay, that, she had everything that she needed. And when there was still no contact, they decided to call law enforcement in the area for a welfare check, because you guys, they're sending large checks monthly, something that they want to do to make sure she's taken care of. And so when you don't know if the checks you're sending are actually going to her, if she's even okay, that's obviously an alarming thing. And so authorities did go out to this house, and you guys, to their utter shock, when authorities arrived at the address, the house was burned to the ground. Totally gone, with only the mailbox still standing. And I don't know when exactly this happened. I've been trying to look it up and find out, but I've not been able to see. But what I do know is that it's been like that for at least a little while, and the checks as of the last few months have all been cashed. So someone is going out to this address every month to collect child support from this lone mailbox standing up amidst all of the completely burned down home. Now, there's a lot of speculation out there about this in particular, the house burning down and the way the girlfriend's dad had tried to claim Kirby's house as theirs that one time. And a lot of people speculate that they're simply just trying to take advantage of a tragic situation and turn it into a money grab, because unfortunately, the girlfriend's dad is a felon where theft was involved. So he's got a criminal record. So this is not absurd to question. He was obviously caught on top of that with Kirby silver in his car. But basically, it's been speculated that they hoped that everything of Kirby's would be left to the girlfriend and they'd just be able to live off of it. And when that didn't happen, they wanted to find another way to get money. So I'm just personally hoping that maybe this will prompt some sort of action from CPS or authorities just to ensure that Kirby's daughter is okay. Obviously, she's in the legal custody of her mother, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But there are definitely rules surrounding child support for those collecting it. So I can almost guarantee you that those avenues are being explored, and hopefully that will lead to more questioning and some sort of answers. So as I've kind of briefly gone over, I personally don't think it's as likely this was a crime of opportunity. Nothing just really seems to add up to that. And while his family has stated that he doesn't really have any enemies, I feel like when you're in that line of work, sometimes people just have a problem with you simply because you are successful. And so I feel like if someone was quietly jealous or maybe had a small incident with Kirby that he felt like wasn't a huge deal. Maybe they thought it was major, and maybe it led him to being a target. Honestly, I don't know, but what I do know is that there are very strange details surrounding Kirby's relationship that I hope they are one day able to kind of question further. Again, Kirby's family has started a Facebook group, Justice for Kirby. I highly encourage you guys to go and give it a follow, show them support, hear what they have to say. They're kind of slowly going through all of the information that they have, pointing out small things that seem to stick out to them. They're incredibly, incredibly open to thoughts and opinions. So if you are someone who has thoughts on this case, or you have maybe some way to help the family, some sort of resource you think would be valuable to them, give them a follow. I have a link to their Facebook page down below, and obviously be as respectful as possible. He was just a good guy, living his life to the fullest, surrounded by family. He, just like every other victim out there, did not deserve whatever happened to him. And someone is out there fully knowing what they did to him, how they affected his family, how they've gone on to fully change the lives of his 2 young children that now have to grow up without him. I hope someone either grows a conscience, or there's some sort of information that eventually comes out, because whoever did this needs to be brought to justice so that Kirby's family can try to move forward and not just constantly be surrounded by all of these unanswered questions. My heart goes out to Kirby's family and his children. As of right now, there isn't really a strong call to action. They don't have a GoFundMe that I've seen. I don't know if that's something that will happen in the future. I'm keeping an eye on their Facebook page just in case. So right now, really just helping them with the whole reason they started social media to begin with. Push his story out there. It can be this video, it can be the Facebook page. You can look him up on TikTok. There's tons of videos out there. Just make sure people know about him. Make sure people know what happened. Make sure people are pushing so that everyone knows in the county of Tippah, Mississippi, that no one's going to forget Kirby. No one's going to let this just settle and be swept under the rug. People are still thinking about it. People want to see his family and Kirby get justice. Thank you guys so much for taking the time out of your day to listen to Kirby's story. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below to become a part of the Howlin' fam so that we can hopefully bring them home together or bring them justice together. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.